All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's stay with a topic that continues to push boundaries. Let's talk space.
Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff.
All right, obviously all of you know these images more than 50 years ago, also more than 50 years ago since we sent people into space, and it's still so fascinating to watch and think about it, isn't it? And that fascination, that very much still applies to our next guest. And she is, according to NZZ, one of the 10 young Swiss men or women that you absolutely need to know. She's only 28 years old. She just handed in her PhD thesis at the University of Cambridge. She is an analog astronaut. What exactly that is, I'll tell you in just a second. She's also a triathlete, so it's somewhat mind-boggling, everything she does. It's fantastic to have her here. Eleonore Poli, welcome. Take a seat.
Thank you.
Now, you were born in Switzerland, in Lausanne. You speak very good German, I know that, but let's stay with the language of space. That's English, obviously.
Affirmative, right?
So I'm wondering, and I didn't know this before, I'm not sure a lot of people in this room know, what is an analog astronaut?
An analog astronaut is someone who will do an analog space mission. So that doesn't really answer the question, right? An analog space mission aims to replicate a space mission on Earth or under the water with less cost and less danger. Basically, you will conduct the same activities as an astronaut would do, but instead of being in microgravity, you will be maybe inside a tin can or in a lava tube or in a submarine.
And you have a couple pictures to show us what exactly you've done.
So this, for example, is one of the missions where we were in Armenia, and you can see two of our analog astronauts from the Austrian Space Forum. They are wearing spacesuits that are just simulators. They're not completely pressurized, but we do have a ventilation system in them. The spacesuits are about 50 kilos, and they do have an exoskeleton to simulate the work that you would have actually to do in space, how much strain you would actually put on it.
So you've been in space in the analog way, and you've been to Mars. Is it like having like a VR headset? How can I kind of envisage it?
I wish I had been to Mars, but yes, so we've been simulating Mars. No, so what you do is that you never get out of the habitat or your lava tube or your simulated spacecraft without one of those spacesuit simulators. We do have some missions. For example, we got one planned in Iceland in August, where our astronauts will be 2 weeks in the lava tube and they will never see the sunlight. They will only go out at night and they will be wearing those spacesuits. And what it actually does is that it simulates really the fact that you can't feel fresh air. On one of these pictures, for example, that was me doing one of my missions. Okay, there's some grass. We were supposed to do the mission in February, but it was still a very convenient way to simulate. I can't breathe normally, and if I were to remove this, I die. And if we were to see human beings, because sometimes you are in very isolated locations and sometimes not, if we were to talk about human beings we see, we'd be like, we got an alien on the left, over. That's what we would say.
Now, the next photo is an interesting one because you're in ice. Show us that one. Wow, that's cold. So what happens here?
What happens here? That was during the Explorer School. What is very interesting is in analog missions, you're actually really not too far from expedition training. I was preparing a mission actually in Antarctica and the F-Mars base, which is led by the Mars Society. And we wanted to do a 1-month mission over there. And we wanted to really push our boundaries. And when you do ice diving, actually that was my first diving was my first time with ice diving. Actually, this was my second time. You actually feel a bit like you're in space because under the ground, under the ice, you can't feel anything, you can't hear anything. It's cold, it's peaceful, and it's a very good way to replicate the conditions of space. You are in an extreme environment. If you mess up, you die, or you will have some damages. And I absolutely love ice diving. It's one of my most favorite feelings in the world, actually.
Favorite feeling in the world.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
What does being an analog astronaut, what does it teach us, the business world, about failure and mistakes and that's it's a constant in our lives, and you did an incredible TED Talk about it. How do the two go hand in hand?
Well, if you look at this picture, that's me failing, you see. It was a very good teaching moment. That was one of the trainings that we actually had to do for my first mission. And as a team bonding exercise, we had to simply get into the water, freezing water, obviously. And the problem is I slipped and I fell. Luckily, I had that rope. And what happens is basically you can't breathe. So you're like this. It's really not fun. And you get really nice pictures for your future dating profiles. It's lovely. But what was really cool is that I knew that I had my team with me. When you do an analog mission and when you prepare for a space mission, and that's been going on since the 60s. Already when we were doing the Apollo and Mercury missions, we had to rehearse on Earth. We had to fail on Earth so that we succeed in space. And when you have a failure like this, what happens is that you will check all your systems. What did we do wrong? Okay, we need to improve this. I'm also an engineer, I'm a researcher. We have things breaking down all the time. But when you repair them, and when you repair them as a team, when you improve protocols as a team, it gives you the confidence that you can succeed up there. It builds your team, it builds your capabilities, and it builds your confidence. And I think this is so important in everything, business and in your life, even if you have children. Okay, maybe you did a mistake one day, but you can learn the next day how to raise them. It's not a problem. But you need to fail first before you learn from your mistakes. You will never do 100% correct.
Do you take corporate bookings here? I think everyone should go to an analog astronaut camp for a while. Anyways, I want to know more about you, Eleonore Poli. And I have this cliche in mind where maybe you were a couple years old, 4 or 5 years old, and you were looking out, up in the sky, seeing the stars, and you said, hey, I want to be an astronaut. Was it like that?
As a kid, yes, I wanted to be an astronaut, but I always had this feel, no, that's just for the perfect people, I always wanted to be an engineer, either an environmental engineer or an astrophysicist. I also wanted to be a military pilot because I love playing with a billion thing, and in Switzerland means you don't kill anyone, which is like, it's great to play with that kind of toy and just fly, etc. And
or you get to land on the highways.
Exactly. Well done. And then I started studying material science, and I was basically getting on the same path as other people who became astronauts were, and there's not one unique path. And I was thinking, well, you know what, let's go for it. And then I saw this ad saying, do you want to be an astronaut? Now, in Europe and in Switzerland, to become an astronaut, you can only go through the European Space Agency. The European Space Agency only recruits every 15 years or so. Now it's going to be a bit more often. But I was like, oh, this is weird. And that was 5 years ago.
And you applied?
I applied. I was the first one to apply, of course. And of course, they got me because it was analog astronaut, not astronaut. But, best experience of my life.
Well, so you applied, but you were too young, essentially. Would you apply again?
For ESA, I did apply. That was 3 years ago, the 2021 call. Yes, of course, I would, yes. It's a dream job, but what is good is if you love what you already do, because as an astronaut, it's very unlikely you're going to be taken. The last time they took 20 people out of 22,604 people who applied.
Wow.
Tough job.
Do you get the sense that it's more difficult to become, anyone going to space, an astronaut, if you're Swiss? On top of that, you're a woman. And then Switzerland is known for a lot of things. They do a lot of things very well, but not really in the space industry. Is that tough?
That's actually, no. Switzerland does give actually quite a bit of money to ESA. So the way ESA works is that depending on how much a country gives, they will favorize those people. So that's why ESA is often calling for young graduate trainee programs for Swiss people, because there's a lot of money, but there's not that many citizens. And from the human spaceflight standpoint, yes, they do give a lot. So Marco Sieber, he's our new astronaut. We had Claude Nicollier, who was on the space shuttle mission. Then we have Marco Sieber, he's our new Swiss astronaut. If Switzerland had not given enough money, we wouldn't have had a new Swiss astronaut. As a woman, is it more difficult to work in the space sector? obviously, when you're a scientist or an engineer, there is still this kind of outdated feel that, you're not good enough. Yes, I have to fight 10 times more in different missions, like the mission in Armenia, just from different cultures standpoint. I just had to fight all the time because I was a woman. But the good thing is I'm not scared of anyone, and I know how to yell, which was good because I was the commander there. But in Switzerland, no, we have a lot of innovation. We just don't have the tradition. This is something that we're missing. And that's why we try to empower people. That's why we try to talk to kids also.
That's really important. Do you think, you're so ambitious, do you think you can be the first Swiss woman in space?
Maybe. It's going to be a chance thing. Maybe I will have a medical issue and then I won't be able to go to space. Maybe there will be somebody more competent than me. There's no easy answer. You never know what happens. And for me, being the first Swiss woman is not important. For me, space is this one place where we can all be together. And my favorite space missions are not the one that are high-tech. It's not the one Starliner, taking off yesterday. No, it's the Apollo-Soyuz missions. It's the epitome of you have nations that are at war, or Cold War in that case, in that situation in the 80s, that in this conflict, and yet in space, we come together. In space, our boundaries do not matter. In space, it's technology and humankind that is important. And not I'm Swiss. Sure, I'm Swiss. I would love to be, but I don't need to be that first Swiss person, and I don't know how likely it would be. And half of it is in my control, and the half, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm. You bring up Starliner yesterday, and we see that going to space is increasingly commercial. And in a way, that's really good because, any of us, if we have some small change, we can go to space, and that's fantastic. Virgin Atlantic, Blue Origin, for example, Starliner yesterday, even though that's sort of a public-private partnership, but really important. But I know, Eleonore, you're somewhat skeptical here. Why?
Skeptical. I think that commercial spaceflight is one way to bring technology forward. That is very true. I personally don't think I would deserve to go to space as a tourist.
Why not?
Because I think when you're an astronaut, it's one of the biggest sacrifices in the sense that your time, your sweat, your blood, your muscles, everything, they know everything about you from tip to toe. And I think I want to give this to humanity. The price to see the planet from up there is that I give part of me, is that I go there as a scientist, I go there as a guinea pig. And I think that people don't necessarily understand, what it is. When they go, a lot of them, they do see this and they think, oh, it's beautiful, but the other people from the other side don't understand what it is to be in space or to work for it for so much time. I think we need to have a bit more respect for space in general.
That's very inspiring and very noble, but if I gave you a ticket, or if anyone gave you a ticket to go on one of these commercial flights, you wouldn't take it?
I would take it only if I'm able to bring a large array of experiments. So if I can perform a lot of experiments, if I can yield a lot of results, and if I can undergo training, yes. But for me, a 30-minute ride above the common line is not necessarily that you are an astronaut. For me, I don't think I would view myself as an astronaut as long as I haven't given more of myself.
Not sure if there's space for all this material and the equipment. Anyways, a final question to you. We've talked about your ambitions, but let's talk about the ambitions for space overall. Will we go to Mars anytime soon?
Anytime soon, no, it depends what your anytime soon time frame
Let's say
is.
2030, that's apparently also when we reach AGI.
2030 is probably going to be a bit too early. It's going to depend a lot on what is happening left and right. It's going to depend on the global situation. First, we're going to go back to the moon. Hopefully that's going to be next year. So let's see Artemis mission, but it might be from other countries. After this, we got the gateway that we want to install between the moon and Mars. And after this, Mars. But it's going to be a long journey, and we need to find some very motivated volunteers to spend 2-4 years in space and maybe not come back.
That's a very long time. Eleonore, thank you so much. You're such an inspiration to all of us. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.